I wish I could tell you this started with a dramatic confrontation, like me storming onto my own property yelling at strangers, but honestly, it started way quieter than that, the kind of quiet that makes things way worse later. So picture this. I'm driving through this suburban neighborhood I don't even live in, just cutting through because of a road closure, totally normal afternoon, nothing special. And then I glance over at my corner lot, my lot, and I slow down without even realizing it because something feels off. At first, my brain doesn't even process it. It's just color and movement and noise. And then it hits me. There are people on my land. Not one or two, not someone accidentally cutting across. I'm talking a full group, like a dozen people, gloves, tools, wood planks, bags of soil, like they're setting up for a weekend project. I actually pull over, engine still running, just staring, because there's no version of reality where this makes sense. And then I see it. A banner, big, professionally printed, stretched between two posts right at the front of the lot. And it says something along the lines of Community Garden Initiative, sponsored by the HOA. And I just laugh. Not because it's funny, because it's so absurd my brain doesn't know what else to do. Now here's the thing. I'm not just some random guy who forgot he owned land. I'm a civil engineer. This is literally what I do for a living. I read plats. I deal with property lines, easements, boundaries. I know exactly what I own and where it is. And I bought this lot 6 years ago. Clean transaction, title search, survey, everything done by the book. It wasn't cheap either. I saved for years. Picked that specific lot because of the location and these 4 massive oak trees on the corner. I had plans for it, long-term plans, like building a house around those trees someday. So sitting there watching strangers dig into the exact area I had mentally designed for a patio. Yeah, that hits different. But what really got me wasn't just the trespassing, it was the confidence. Nobody looked confused. Nobody looked like they were checking if they were in the right place. They were acting like they owned it. And right in the middle of all of it was this woman, clipboard in hand, walking around like a project manager on a construction site, pointing, nodding, directing people. The HOA president. I recognized her from the newsletters. She had this energy like everything happening there was not only allowed, but her idea, her project, her space. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't an accident. This was a decision. Now most people in that situation probably would have jumped out of the car, started yelling, caused a scene, but that's not how my brain works. My brain goes somewhere else entirely, documentation. So I grab my phone, start recording, slow pan across everything. The banner, the people, the truck full of materials, the soil already turned over, the raised beds stacked up. I take photos, I note the time, I make sure I capture her face, her directing everything. And then, I leave. Didn't say a word to anyone. And I know that sounds crazy, like why wouldn't you stop them right there? But here's the thing. The longer they worked, the deeper they dug themselves into a hole. Every board they nailed together, every shovel of dirt they moved, that wasn't just landscaping, that was evidence. So I let them keep going. I go home, open my safe, pull out the deed, the survey, everything exactly where it should be, clean, undeniable proof that the land is mine. Then I log into the HOA portal, because yeah, I pay my dues like everyone else, and I check the latest newsletter. And that's when it gets unbelievable. Front page. There she is, smiling, holding a shovel, standing on my land. And the article underneath? It describes the garden project as a beautification effort on a neglected piece of community-owned land. I read that line 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting it. Community-owned. My property. Published, distributed, time-stamped. And I just leaned back in my chair thinking, you really did that to yourself. Because from that moment on, this isn't just trespassing anymore. This is documented misrepresentation. So I screenshot everything, save it, organize all my files, photos, video, deed, survey, newsletter, and then I draft a letter. Calm, professional, straight to the point. Addressed to the entire HOA board, not just her, because I already had a feeling she'd try to control the narrative if I didn't. I explained the situation, attach proof of ownership, request that all activity stop immediately, and ask them to contact me to resolve it. No threats, no emotion, just facts. Then I send it certified mail, signature required. And when I drop that envelope off, I already know this isn't going to end quietly. Because people who act with that level of confidence, unearned confidence, They don't back down easily. And honestly, I was curious to see just how far they were willing to take it. Now, before we jump back into what happened next, let me slow this down for a second, because this is where the situation stops being just crazy HOA drama and starts becoming something way more predictable if you understand how these systems work. According to standard procedure, an HOA does have authority over shared spaces, amenities, and enforcing community rules, but that authority has very clear boundaries, and those boundaries stop immediately at privately owned property. They don't get to reclassify land just because it looks unused, and they definitely don't get to develop it without explicit written consent from the legal owner. From a legal perspective, what they were doing crossed multiple lines at once: trespass, unauthorized development, and arguably even misrepresentation when they publicly claimed ownership in that newsletter. And here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't just about law, it's about psychology. This is a psychological trap I've seen before, especially in tightly controlled communities. When someone holds power for a long time, like an HOA president who's been in charge for years, they start to blur the line between managing a community and owning it. The language shifts, the mindset shifts. Suddenly, it's not the neighborhood, it's my neighborhood. And once that belief sets in, actions follow. They stop double-checking, stop questioning themselves, because in their mind, authority equals permission. Add in a group of volunteers, people who trust that authority, who assume, well, if the HOA says it's fine, it must be fine. And now you've got collective validation reinforcing a bad decision. Nobody wants to be the one person who says, hey, are we sure this is legal? Because everyone else is already digging. And that's how situations like this escalate. Not from one big malicious act, but from a chain of small, unchecked assumptions. The lesson here is confidence is not proof of correctness. And in property law especially, documentation beats opinion every single time. And at this point in the story, I already knew something they didn't. The moment they received my letter and chose to continue anyway, everything was about to change. So a week goes by, quiet, no calls, no emails, nothing, which, honestly, told me everything I needed to know. If they were going to handle this professionally, I would have heard something within a day or two. Silence in situations like this? That's not neutrality, that's avoidance. So I drive back out to the property, same corner, same view. And the moment I turn onto that street, I can already see it from a distance. They didn't stop. Not only did they not stop, they doubled down. The raised garden beds are fully built now, filled with fresh, dark soil, neat rows like something out of a lifestyle magazine. There's gravel paths laid between them, little wooden markers labeling future plants. Tomatoes here, peppers there. It actually looked nice, which somehow made it worse. Because now it wasn't just intrusion, it was transformation. My land didn't look like mine anymore. And then I see the part that really shifts everything. A small crew near the edge of the property digging a trench. Not decorative, not temporary. This was infrastructure. They were installing irrigation piping, tying it into the community water system. Permanent. That's when it clicked in my head. They received my certified letter. They signed for it. They saw the deed, the survey, and they made a conscious decision to continue anyway. And that right there? That's the moment a mistake turns into liability. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, just watching, not angry, not yelling, just processing. Because in my line of work, I've seen disputes, I've seen boundary issues, I've seen people argue over inches of land, but I had never seen someone get formal. Notice and then escalate construction. That's not negligence, that's intent. So I made a couple calls. First one, the surveying company that did my original boundary work. I told them I needed a rush rest-taking. Next morning if possible, no delays. They gave me a price. I didn't negotiate, I just said yes. Because timing mattered now. If this was going where I thought it was going, I needed everything documented cleanly and professionally. Next morning, 7 a.m., they're out there with their equipment. I show up around 8, park across the street, coffee in hand, just watching. There's something almost calming about surveyors at work. Methodical, precise, no emotion, just math and measurement. They set their reference points, run their calculations, and then they start driving stakes into the ground. Every 10 feet along the property line, wooden stakes, bright pink ribbon tied at the top, impossible to miss. And here's the part that was almost surreal. Those stakes didn't politely avoid the garden. They went straight through it. One right in the middle of a gravel path. Two directly through raised beds, splitting them like they weren't even there. Another one placed exactly at the edge of that irrigation trench. From across the street, it looked like a grid cutting through their entire project, like reality itself had shown up and said, "This is where your authority ends." I took photos of everything, wide shots, close-ups, the stakes, the beds, the trench, all of it. Then I called my attorney. Now, this wasn't my first time working with him, so I didn't have to explain much. I just sent over a single organized email with everything attached. Deed, survey, newsletter screenshots, proof of certified mail delivery, photos before and after, the res-taking documentation, clean, chronological, undeniable. He called me back a few hours later, and the first thing he said was, "This is one of the cleanest cases I've ever seen." And that's when I knew this was about to move fast. Within a couple days, he drafts a formal cease and desist, and let me tell you, this was not the polite letter I sent earlier. This one was surgical. It laid out the entire timeline step by step. When construction started, when they were notified, when they confirmed receipt, when they continued work anyway, when the property was restaked. And the language? Very specific, willful trespass, intentional alteration of private property. No room for interpretation. Then came the demands. Immediate stop to all activity. Full restoration of the land to its original condition within 15 business days. Removal of everything they installed, soil, lumber, gravel, irrigation, all at their expense. Plus reimbursement for my legal fees and the surveying costs. And the final line, if they fail to comply, we file a civil lawsuit seeking damages and additional costs. That letter gets sent to the HOA's registered agent and the entire board. And just like that, the clock starts ticking. Now here's the part one didn't see firsthand, but I heard about it later from someone who was in the room. Apparently, after my first letter, the HOA president had been handling everything internally. She told the board it was probably a misunderstanding. Maybe the land belonged to some out-of-state investor who wouldn't care, basically downplaying it enough to keep the project going. But when my attorney's letter hit, that changed the tone immediately. The board treasurer, who up until that point hadn't really questioned things, decides to do something very simple. He looks up the property records. For minutes. That's all it took. My name comes up as the sole owner, clear as day, recorded 6 years ago. No ambiguity. No loophole. Just facts. Emergency board meeting gets called that night. And from what I was told, it was not pretty. You've got the property record printed out, the attorney letter on the table, the newsletter with her photo claiming the land is community-owned, all laid out in front of them. And suddenly the story they thought they were part of looks very different. At some point, she tries to pivot, says something like, "Well, he could have just come talk to me instead of escalating this." And one of the other board members just looks at her and goes, "He sent a certified letter with the deed attached. What exactly did you want him to do?" And that's the moment everything collapses. Because there's no good answer to that. The board votes that night, full compliance. No fight, no delay, just damage control. About 10 days later, the cleanup crew shows up. And I go back to watch again, same spot across the street. First day, they're already tearing apart the raised beds, stacking the wood, hauling it away. Second day, the soil's being removed, loaded into trucks. Third day, the gravel paths are gone. The trench is being filled, compacted carefully in layers so it doesn't sink later. They're being thorough because now they know this is being watched. By the end of the week, the entire area is leveled out, fresh sod laid down, everything green again like nothing ever happened. The oak trees untouched, exactly how I left them. I walked the property afterward, checked the stakes, still there, marking every boundary clearly. And for the first time since this started, it feels quiet again. Like mine. A few weeks later, a check shows up, full amount. Legal fees, survey costs, everything reimbursed down to the dollar. And then the next HOA newsletter comes out, and it's completely different. No cheerful intro, no personal tone. Just a short, carefully worded statement from the board saying the project was mistakenly developed on privately owned land, that it has been fully restored at the association's expense. No names mentioned, but you don't need names at that point. About 6 weeks after that, she resigns. No announcement, no goodbye message, just gone. And honestly, that part didn't surprise me at all. Because when you build your authority on the assumption that no one will challenge you, all it takes is one person with documentation to bring the whole thing down. So yeah, that's how a community garden project turned into a full-blown legal collapse. And honestly, when I look back on it now, the craziest part isn't even the money or the construction or the fact that a whole group of people just decided my land was theirs. It's how avoidable the entire thing was. Like, this didn't require some high-level legal strategy to prevent. It required one person, just one, to pause for maybe 5 minutes and ask a simple question. Do we actually own this land? That's it. But nobody did. And that right there tells you everything about how situations like this happen. The lesson here is, most conflicts aren't created by one big villain making a dramatic decision. They're created by small, unchecked assumptions stacking on top of each other until reality shows up and knocks everything over. Now, from a legal perspective, this case was almost textbook, and I don't say that lightly. You had clear ownership, documented boundaries, formal notice, confirmed delivery, and then continued action after that notice. That sequence is everything. Because once someone keeps going after they've been informed, it stops being a misunderstanding and starts being willful. And in property law, willful actions carry weight. They change how damages are calculated, how liability is viewed, how fast things escalate. That's why I didn't confront them in the moment. And I know some people watching this are probably thinking, man, I would have gone out there and shut that down immediately. Maybe. But here's the reality. Confrontation might have stopped the garden that day, but it also would have erased the paper trail. No documentation, no formal notice, no escalation, just a messy argument that turns into he said, she said. And those cases, they drag on. They get complicated. They get expensive. What I did instead was let them show me exactly how far they were willing to go, and then documented every step of it. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into. The need to react immediately, to defend your space emotionally, to win the moment. But sometimes the smarter move is to step back and let the other side reveal their position completely. Because once they commit, they can't undo it. And that's exactly what happened here. They committed publicly, legally, structurally. And by the time they realized the situation, there was no clean exit left. Now, there's another layer to this that I think is worth talking about, and that's power. Specifically, what happens when someone holds a small amount of authority for a long time? Because this wasn't just about land. This was about control. When you run something like an HOA for years, especially one that people are already a little intimidated by, you start to operate differently. Decisions feel less like decisions and more like defaults. You stop asking for permission because you're used to being the one who gives it. And over time, that creates a kind of tunnel vision where you genuinely believe you're acting in the best interest of the community, even when you're stepping way outside your actual authority. According to standard procedure, HOA boards are supposed to operate collectively, with checks and balances, votes, documentation, but when one person dominates that structure long enough, those safeguards start to weaken. People defer. They assume things are being handled correctly. And that's how you end up with an entire board backing a decision they didn't fully understand until it was too late. The lesson here is authority without verification is dangerous, especially in systems that rely on trust. And if you're on the other side of that, if you're a homeowner or a property owner, you have to understand something really important. Just because something looks official doesn't mean it's correct. A logo, a title, a newsletter, none of that overrides actual ownership. Documentation does. Always. And I think that's the part people underestimate. They assume the system will protect them automatically. But systems don't act, people do. And people make mistakes. Big ones. So you have to protect yourself. Keep your records organized. Know what you own. And when something doesn't feel right, don't rely on assumptions. Verify. Now, on a more personal level, I also learned something about restraint. Because I had every opportunity to turn this into a public spectacle. I could have confronted them, filmed it, posted it online, embarrassed people in real time. And yeah, maybe that would have been satisfying for a minute. But it wouldn't have solved the problem the right way. Instead, I stayed quiet, stayed methodical, and let the process work. And in the end, the outcome spoke for itself. The garden disappeared. The land was restored. The costs were covered. And the person responsible? Gone. No shouting required. So if you take anything away from this story, let it be this. You don't always win by being the loudest person in the room. Sometimes you win by being the most prepared, by understanding the rules better than the people trying to bend them, by letting facts do the heavy lifting. And trust me, facts are a lot harder to argue with than emotions. But I'm curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have walked straight onto that property and shut it down on day one? Let me know in the comments, because situations like this, they happen more often than people realize, and how you respond can change everything.